Shalom, I'm Rabbi Gail Schuster-Buskila, and today I'd like to talk with you about my Midrash for the 7th parasha of the book of Genesis, the 7th weekly Torah portion, Vayetze. We're going to talk about the idea from the video that you just saw. I started differently today because I wanted pictures of parents, of mothers and children especially, before I discuss this midrash. And I'd like to think of it as a way to understand the problems of our matriarch, Rachel. We're going to be discussing the section from Genesis 30. Now, if you are interested in reading the entire Parashat Vayetze, or the parasha or the chapter of Genesis, then of course I suggest again this wonderful Sefaria website where they have put the Hebrew and the English together. So it's a very interesting story. We're only going to read a few verses, as usual. I'm going to start from verse 1 of Genesis 30. Rachel realized that she hadn't given birth from Jacob. She was jealous of her sister. She said to Jacob, "Let me have sons. If not, I am dead." Jacob was infuriated by Rachel. He said, "Am I in God's place that I have prevented you from producing offspring?" My midrash begins. Why didn't Jacob show sympathy for Rachel, whereas Isaac prayed for Rivka to give birth? Was Rachel asking for too much support from a man who'd been indulged by his mother, a controlling mother? In Genesis 25, it said that Isaac called out to Yahweh in the presence of his wife who was barren. Yahweh answered his call, so Rivka, his wife, became pregnant. Just as I said, this is a very odd thing, that the father and the son do not behave in the same way. Verse 3 in Genesis 30 says, Rachel said, "Here is my handmaid Bilhah. Go to her. She will give birth on my behalf, so I too will have offspring through her." My midrash continues. Why couldn't Rachel have enough patience or faith to wait for her own son? Why bring in Bilhah? Why then did Leah bring in Zilpah? I believe I had a little glitch there. Sorry. My midrash will continue here with Psalm 121. I've left the idea of the mothers competing, the sisters, and gone to the feeling that if Jacob isn't helping to pray for a child, it's very possible that Rachel is now trying to find a way to get through this difficult period in her life. Psalm 121 says, a song of ascent, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where will my help come from? My Midrash continues, an empty womb is a cosmic void. It yearns and tugs at the brain of a sane woman day after day, week after week, month after month, and suddenly many years have passed. Where can sanity be found then? Rivers dry up more quickly in drought than the barren woman's tears. Biology cannot be denied its place in her life. She is never whole while barren. In the modern Israeli experience, we have this wonderful poem by Rachel Bluestein-Sela, called Barren. I wish I had a son, a little boy, bright with black curly hair. I would take his hand in mine and stroll slowly through the garden. Little boy, Uri, I'd call him my Uri. How gentle and clear this tiny name, a glimmer of joy for my little boy. Uri, I'd call him. I myself spent many years before I could successfully have a child, and so I understand Rachel's poem, and I understand what Rachel from the biblical text was going through intimately. Empathy. Empathy is something that I know that Jacob just did not have. He hardly even had sympathy. So when I go back to my Midrash, I try to add the things that I have experienced to the text. In verse 22 of Genesis, God remembered Rachel, heard her, and opened her womb. In verse 23, she became pregnant, gave birth to a son, and said, God has alleviated my humiliation. Life is our only real creation. When this once stony womb is full of life, all joy floods the body and mind. The moment of conception isn't clear, but the moment that life stirs within makes quiet hope arise. The first stirrings of a long-awaited unborn child make a resounding clamor in a mother's heart. It is the promise of the future she holds fast to her. May all go well for mother and child. Some of you might recognize the picture of the baby at the end of my Midrash. I'm not so sure. If you want to ask, I'd be glad to answer. Many times I try to add material after my Midrash, and today I'm adding for you the end of the video that I showed you. The video was called Operation Blessing, and it comes from Vimeo. I will put a link to it at the bottom of this video, and I really hope that you enjoyed today's Midrash. Shabbat Shalom. Parashat Vayetze.